I want to talk about the Olympics opening ceremony thing a little bit. And I don't make too many videos or like commentary on popular trends or current events things, but I think this is just like such on a global, massive scale an offense against God that I would feel almost irresponsible not saying something about it. It needs to be addressed. But I think it is also, there's a great teaching moment here, because I think that far and wide, the Christian people, the Church of God, has been making a response against this, that it is an offense against God, that it was a mockery of the Last Supper. And again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you pretty much can't even find the video anymore. As far as this morning, the video seems to have been deleted everywhere online of this opening ceremony mockery of the Last Supper, which essentially was, there's a few details, but the main point that I want to address, and I think the main offense here, the main mockery, was in a depiction of the Last Supper, specifically like Da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper with Jesus and the 12 as drag queens, all dressed up and arrayed in their costumes or whatever, arrayed in the image of Da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper. So far and wide in the church, people have been giving this outcry that it's a mockery and it's an offense against God. But why it is an offense against God, I think has not been well enough addressed. So I just want to try to talk about that in this video. And I actually want to start by saying that I think what they did was actually a creative idea. Creative in the sense of creativity being taking novel combinations of sets of rules or norms and putting them together, arranging them in a way that it reveals something about the world or how it works, how human beings work. And I think that can be done in a way that is delightful and that is like enlightening. It can be done in a way that is surprising. It can be done in a way that is offensive. And I think often creativity is created in a way that is meant to be an offense, but in the way that things like contrast, where it's like clearly these two things don't go together in terms of like the way that the world works. So it reveals something of like these two things are at opposition. And I think that what they did does that. But I think because the outcry against it is so great, the offense is intrinsic to what it means to be a human being and who God is and how the world was created to be. So it is so intrinsically offensive that I think it is so objectively wrong that it needs to be addressed. Because the gist of this is that drag queens and everything that goes along with the culture of that and the LGBTQ world, and I made another video on this just a few weeks ago, a month or two ago, talking about like the Catholic response to LGBTQ. And I think that's a very good representation and explanation of what the church believes and why and the beauty of the church's teaching. So I will link that video first down below to go into this in more depth. But in the beginning in Genesis in the Bible, it says that God said, "Let us create human beings in our image." As a Trinitarian God, he says, let us create in our image. So he creates human beings that are multiple to enter into communion, male and female different, so that when they come together, the union of the two can bring forth new life. They are made not just as one, but as two, so they can be unitive, and in such a way that they share in the image of God, who is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, that the union of those three persons, the union of God the Father and Christ the Son, pours forth the Holy Spirit that is unitive and is procreative, that it brings forth new life. So male and female is how God created human beings to be. So the idea of drag is essentially that most often men are dressed in an exaggeratedly female fashion and put on performances that often just like go directly in offense to human sexuality and gender norms as God intended them to be. So placing drag queens, or whatever you want to call them, in the mode of and in the image of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, conveying and conferring a covenant to his people in the Last Supper is incredibly offensive. And it needs to be said that what they did as they were not just creating some like creative artistic depiction of a painting that once was painted in time, but that painting was a depiction of an event that took place in history which changed the world. That Jesus Christ, in human history, had a Last Supper with his closest friends. Jesus Christ, who was the incarnate Word, who was the God of the universe, the eternal Son of the Father, who took on flesh. The God of the universe looking down on creation, who sinned against him, who he loved into creation and put them in the Garden of Eden in paradise to be living in communion with him, and that Adam and Eve, the first man and woman, chose against God and said, I see what you have created for us, and we want to do things our way. So that continues throughout history, that all of humanity continues to say, I see what God has given us, but we want to do it our way, that is sin. And that perpetuates so long and just to the point where God says, enough of this, I must intervene in the only possible way. I will go and take on flesh and be with them. The God of the universe who created mankind in his image and gave them free will, and that man so offended God and chose against God that God had to come into the world, so loved the world that he sent his only son to be one of us. Jesus Christ comes and takes on our flesh. And then at the Last Supper, he reclines at table with his close friends. And what he does there at that Last Supper, in the beginning of the mystery, we call the Paschal mystery of Jesus Christ offering himself for the life of the world. That later that night he's arrested and he's mocked and he's beaten and he's sentenced to death, and he goes and he dies on a cross for the sins of humanity. It begins that night at the Last Supper. Jesus takes bread and wine at the Passover meal, proclaims over it, and says and forms a covenant with his friends. This is my body. He forms this covenant with his people. He offers them his body, and he goes to the cross, and he gives up and lays down and sacrifices his body. He takes the nails in his hands and his feet for the sins of his friends. For the sin of Peter, who goes and denies ever knowing Jesus. For the sin of Judas, who goes and betrays Jesus for 20 silver pieces. He goes to the cross and he takes the nails for those who would say 2,000 years later, I see what God has created. I see how he created male and female, but I want it my way. So I'm going to flip gender roles as God created them. I'm going to pervert and distort the way that God created male and female. And Jesus, that night at the Last Supper, knew that this would happen. Jesus Christ, knowing that 2,000 years from now, the God of the universe, all-powerful and all-knowing, knew that the sin of Peter, the sin of Judas, the denial, the betrayal, the choosing of their own way versus the way of Jesus, that sin would continue, and that sin would happen at the Paris Olympics in the opening ceremony, that people would say, the way that God intended the world to be, the thing that he died to give us, we still will have it our way. And so Jesus took the nails and he offered his body, not just for the 12 then, not just for you and me now, but for those who mocked him at the Paris Olympics opening ceremony. Imagine someone died for you, someone took a bullet for you, someone stepped in front of a car or a train or whatever, gave their life to save yours. And then at their funeral, what you did is you went up in front of the whole crowd and blatantly mocked and offended them. Someone who did an incredible act of love for you. And this is what you offer them in return. The heart of this, hopefully, is that what we find in the Last Supper is part of the greatest love story of all time. That the God of the universe looks down on his creation and loves them so much that he gives his entire life to save you and me. So what this is an offense against is not just like we cannot hurt the God of the universe. We cannot harm him. We cannot bring him down. He willingly lowers himself. He willingly takes nails in his hands and his feet. He willingly endures the things that we do against him so as to love us and so as to offer us mercy and forgiveness. So while it is an offense, it does not hurt God. It only offers us a moment to acknowledge, wow, there's something awry here. There's something distorted and perverted, and I can't quite put my finger on it. And hopefully I just did a little bit here of trying to say, like, what is missing here, and what is awry here, and what is distorted here, is that it goes in direct contrast to the great love that the God of the universe has given us and the great life that he has given us. And glory is offered to us if we say yes to him. But in this mockery and in this offense, if the response is, may God do to me what he wills and I don't care, I'll have it my way, then I only pity you. And I wish it were not that way. And I wish you'd come to know that the God of the universe does indeed love you, that he is willing to take nails for you, and for that phrase in particular. And he will continue to go to the cross for you today and every day, only hoping and praying that you would come back. Because while he was mocked and offended at the opening ceremony, it was not the first time, and it probably won't be the last time, but it cannot bring down Jesus Christ, and it does not diminish his love for us. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And he will always be here for us. He will continue to take the nails for us. He'll continue to offer us mercy and love. So let's just pray that the mercy of God would pour out on Paris, on France as a nation, upon this whole world. Because the change that the world needs to embrace and endure and go through, the conversion that the world needs, begins with me. And beyond anyone who could ever do something so offensive, I surely have my own ways that I offend the Lord every day. So this message is for me too, and conversion begins with me and you. So may today we receive more, once again renewed, the love of Jesus Christ and his mercy, and may we ask for it once again. Lord, forgive us. We know not what we do.